Hi, this is Barbara, and I'm going to start, and Bruce is going to follow with some the second half of our communication. I'm going to start on behalf of the nominating committee with some thank yous to Bruce Pappas and Carol Snyder, who will both be rolling off the committee. I'd like to say to Bruce, we'd like to thank him for his leadership, his personal commitment, and 30 years of service on the nominating committee, and to thank Carol for sharing her knowledge, time, and 3 years on the committee as well. We appreciate both of your willingness to give of yourselves very much. I'd also like to recognize and thank some other members of our congregation who stepped up to fill several vacant positions that we had this year. Jansen Wendell and Yasara Antar offered their service to take on the work of 2 open board positions. And then mid-year, Valerie Saris and Nancy McDowell kindly stepped up to fill 2 open committee positions we had on the nominating committee. We started off this year with those vacant positions, and it was a struggle, particularly during the pandemic, to be doing the work. So we very much appreciate their joining us mid-year. And in that same regard, we want to really thank the board for supporting us and appointing these individuals and all of our work during the past year. Lastly, I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone in the congregation who spoke with us. We spoke with a lot of people. It was a lot of phone calls this year to do the recruitment for the positions. And we appreciate the time people took to consider a position on the board, nominating committee, or for a period of time in the Committee of Ministry of Health. As you all know, we're going to be looking for candidates again for the board and nominating committee. And I wanted to encourage all of you to consider sharing your experiences, your perspectives, your time on one of these committees. And if you haven't considered a leadership role, please consider reaching out to any one of us on the nominating committee to learn a little bit more about it. As Jess mentioned earlier, we will also be taking on work to select members of the search committee for the new senior minister. And I wanted to emphasize that the congregation has a very important role in this process. As many of you may have already seen our communication that went out earlier this month, the nominating committee is going to be issuing a call for recommendations, where we're asking all members to provide thoughtful recommendations of trusted candidates who can perform the important tasks that are involved in finding the next senior minister. And we're going to be asking you to consider congregants who you think can represent the whole congregation, not just one area or one group within the church. Someone who can work very well on a team, that's most important, and has demonstrated leadership, responsible leadership, and participation in the church. And that can be someone who's been a longtime member or someone who's a more recent new member. You can see our initial communication about the search committee via a link on the MLUC website. If you miss it in the e-notes or what's happening. And as Jess mentioned, we can also answer any questions you might have about. There you go.
Well, I can jump in. I think what Barbara was talking about was the effort for the search committee, and that although there's an initial communication, we'll be following that up very soon with more details about maybe some dates and some additional procedures that we'll go through for looking for people to fill that position on the search committee. So fortunately, I think that she was at the end, and that's all I have to add about that. So I can continue on with this. First, I'd like to thank Barbara for being my co-chair this past year, and to let everyone know that she will be continuing on next year as the chair of the nominating committee. And on to the nominees. So we have a full slate of nominees, 9 people this year instead of the normal 5, who would be 3 people for the board and 2 people for the nominating committee. And the reason we have the additional 4 people is because Barbara explained, we started the year with some vacancies, and we had some situations where people had to end their service early. So those positions, although they were, we did find candidates, and they are still candidates. They were appointed by the board to fill that remaining year, but they're on the slate now to continue the term, or the rest of the term, and that's to be according to your voting votes. So all the nominees' petitions were put up on the MLUC website, and they included full biographies that the candidates wrote for themselves that if you haven't read, I'd encourage you to look at. I'm certainly not going to read them here to you. But for the record, I do want to make note that we went through the procedure of posting the petitions, and everyone received votes that far surpassing the required numbers. One of the advantages of doing it virtually instead of on a piece of paper is that it just could go on and on and on. Thank you, Rich, for updating the names. So we have, I'm going to just list the names of the people and I'll tell you who is running. So for the board, we have 3 people who are running for the full 3 years. And that would be Madeline Psycho, Marlies Singh, and Mark Hurl. I think it's a great slate of people who've been with the church for a long time, as you can read in their bios. Additionally, on the board, running for a term of 2 years, is Yashara Antar and Jansen Wendell, filling some vacant positions. So we have 5 people for the board. On the nominating committee, there are 4 people running. The first 2 people are running for the full 3-year term. That would be Rick Joers and Joanne Rose. And then we have, for a 2-year term, Valerie Saris, and for a 1-year term, Nancy McDowell. I think that's about it.
Well, thank you, Bruce and Barbara, for your service and for that great presentation. And again, we'll not be voting at this time on the slate of candidates. That will be done by absentee ballot to be announced and counted as of June 11th. And please reserve any questions you may have on the nominating committee's presentation until the final 10 minutes of the meeting, at which time we've allotted time for questions pertaining to this presentation. So without further ado, we will now proceed to our next order of business, which is MLUC's reopening, presented by our Director of Lifespan Faith Development, Don Starr Saras-Borchardt.
All right. So I just want to start out by taking us back through how we got here. A year and a quarter ago, we made the decision to move church programming and worship services online and virtual. And it wasn't always smooth, and it certainly wasn't always easy, but we did our best as a staff and as leaders and as members and friends to make it work. And in a lot of ways, it did really work, and we learned a lot. And over time, we were able to set criteria for when we would be able to do things together in person again. And I know many people may have wondered why we haven't gone back to in-person meetings and worship long before now. After all, many other organizations and businesses in our lives did reopen months ago. And we didn't reopen earlier for several reasons, but the one that I want to highlight here is that church is different from most places we go, because what we come to church for is to be in community together with people. And when we go shopping or sightseeing or so on, of course, we do see other people, but mostly we go to do something specific and then we leave and go home. And when we come to church, yeah, we're coming for a specific meeting or event, but what the real reason we come is because we want to see the people. We want to be in community with people. And when we see people, we want to hang out and talk and laugh and sing and hug each other, which is a higher risk activity than wandering around a grocery store. So the criteria that we set were that when the 3 counties we draw from entered yellow or were in the moderate transmission risk area, we would hold indoor gatherings if they seemed safe. And we have gotten to that point. Rich has been telling me all about the fun experiments he's been running with carbon dioxide detectors and dry ice. And we are going to start next Sunday, June 13th. We're going to do a live worship service from the sanctuary, and we will have up to 100 people in the building participating. The service will also be streamed live on YouTube and the church website. So if you want to or need to keep doing exactly what you've been doing to watch the service, you can keep doing that. After the service, we'll have an outdoor coffee hour for both in-person attendees and folks who drive over afterwards. So what can you expect next week? We're asking people to sign up to attend, first come, first serve. The link for that is on the website. There are still plenty of slots, although many of you have already signed up. If more than 100 people want to sign up, we'll create a waiting list, and people who are on the waiting list will be able to have first dibs at signing up for the next week. If it turns out that our airflow is adequate for 100 people and it looks like we could let more people in and still have safe airflow, we'll adjust the registration limit upwards. And as transmission rates in the community go down, that will also impact our ability to decide how many people can safely be in the building. We are asking people who come in person to wear their masks indoors. We have children who can't be vaccinated yet, adults who are immune compromised or can't receive the vaccine, and other vulnerable people. And while it's probably true that those of us who are vaccinated are not a risk to people who are unvaccinated, we're a public space, and we have no way of guaranteeing that every person who might be unmasked is vaccinated. So at least until young children can be vaccinated, we're going to provide them with a good example, and we'll wear our masks indoors. We're going to try out singing a closing hymn next Sunday to see if our airflow can support that extra expulsion of air. And if so, that's great. We can sing more next time. If not, if it looks like that increases carbon dioxide levels to a point where we might be sharing germs, we're all going to go outdoors right after that song anyway, so there won't be any particular risk of exposure. Children will be welcome to attend any or all parts of the service, but we will have supervised play available on the playground for anybody who'd like to get out and move their bodies around. And I want to emphasize that this is where we're starting with a physical reopening of the building, and we're going to continue to experiment with how to ease restrictions and what we can safely do over the summer. And I am happy to take any questions that anybody may have. Rich, are you recognizing folks for that?
I will. So Mary Strongquist.
Has there been any discussion about opening of the choir, either masked or unmasked? Might we do experiments to see what happens when the choir sings? I just haven't heard anything about that. There's kind of been radio silence.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a specific timeline yet, but I'm sure that that will be figured out soon. I have to say that as a staff, this was a little bit of a surprise to us. We only got into orange, which is the level that's, you know, more transmission than yellow, like 2 weeks ago. And so we were like, great, we'll have the worship leaders in the sanctuary and send that out instead of having everybody recording at home. And then within 2 weeks, we were in yellow. So we're scrambling a little bit and we'll get there. Yeah.
We're scrambling a lot. Oh, is my mic on?
Yes. I see Bob Rhodes. But you're muted, Bob. I can't hear you.
Rich, I think that's great using the CO2 monitors. Very clever. What are your threshold criteria? I'm curious.
Well, there are a variety of thresholds, and this is a much longer story than I want to put into an answer here. But if I can keep the level of carbon dioxide below 600 parts per million, then I think we're totally safe. The CDC says 800 parts per million is acceptable. I believe we can target 600 or 700 parts per million and assume we're good.
Great, thank you.
Sally.
You're muted.
I can hear you, but no one else.
I know. If it rains next week, I don't know what the forecast is. Do we have tents for outdoor coffee hour?
First of all, I think the forecast is pretty good the last time I looked at it. And we have a few canopies, but I don't think we have adequate canopies to really protect everyone. Do you have more thoughts about that, Rich?
No, alas, I don't, unless we, suddenly buy a tent.
Bring your umbrella.
Yes, it is a bring your own umbrella, and we have a few spares.
Well, members of the congregation might have these small canopies. They could bring those. That's what I'm saying.
The current weather forecast is mostly cloudy, high of 26, which sounds lovely because it will not be 95 degrees, and a chance of a shower or two during the evening.
Excellent.
So right now it looks pretty good. We'll see.
Okay.
But Sally, that's a great idea. So we'll pass that along to the people who are working on coordinating the coffee hour. And, if we do this again, if everything goes well, then that might be a good idea for us to have in our back pockets, getting volunteers to do canopies.
Are there any other questions?
Hey, Gail, there was a question on the chat about where you can register.
Okay.
So if anyone wants, if you go to the homepage, I know you guys are on here now, but you go to the homepage at the bottom, there's blocks. You can see them across the bottom. And one of them says, in-person services are coming, and there's fireworks, the fireworks. At the bottom of that block is a little button. You click it and it tells you where to sign up. And it's pretty easy. I did it this morning just to test it out. It's a sign up genius, and you just put your name and the number of people you're bringing, and it lets you sign up. So if you haven't already and you're interested in coming, check that out. Thanks, Gail.
If web technology is still not your favorite thing, you could send an email to Mary Heil in the office and she'll put you there. Or
call her. Yeah.
The old-fashioned way.
Oh, and I do just want to mention, because I know somebody's going to notice this and say, what is that about? Right now, the limit on the registration is 80 people, because we know that we have some people who are homebound, who have been homebound, have not had access to technology, who we really want to make sure that we get the opportunity to come to church. And we have staff people who will be there who we know have to be there. So we're going to futz with that exact number and end up with 100 people in the building. Don't worry about that exact number when you're looking at it, if you're signing up. And I see Carol Hillman, but you're muted, so you're going to have to unmute.
A curious question, has the staff gone back to work in the building?
Well, so Mary Heil has worked in the building the entire time. I've been coming in one and sometimes twice a week. Ron D'Annunzio is there quite frequently. The accountant is there once a week.
Jessica and I are there occasionally, but not super often.
And now it's ticking up. I'm there multiple times a week. And I'm sure it will continue to increase.
Thanks.
Doug?
I just wanted to thank you all for all you've done to keep us together during this challenging time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we see any other questions? And there will be some time at the end if you think of something. We don't want to cut anyone off, but we also want to keep ourselves on track.
So if you have a question and we're not seeing you, just unmute and speak. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Okay. And thank you for that great presentation, Dawn Star, and also to every of our amazing staff that has allowed this to happen, and the very interesting experiments designed by our mad scientist executive director. So we will now proceed to our next order of business, which is our interim minister presentation presented by Yasara Antara, Craig Farr, and Dilip Kumar from our Board of Trustees.
Well, I'm the designated speaker this morning. So,
oh, okay, all right.
I'll just go into that. You know, we're a sub-team of the board that was formed after Reverend Neal left to find a temporary minister for 7 months from January until the end of July. And that process is open-ended because we just have to go out and literally find all the sources we can of names to look at and figure out a way to distill that and take recommendations from other people. And we were fortunate enough to find Reverend Christine, and she's been a great fit. So that was a pretty open-ended process. As far as our process to find Reverend Dave, the UC has an approach. I'm just going to briefly explain it, where we submit information about our history, our demographics, and the UC asks us to answer questions in the context of our congregation. And the candidates have all that information to look at. The candidates choose which congregations they would like to interview with. And so everybody gets a list of interviewees. We received 5 requests. We went through those interviews, and at the end, we have to rank the interviewees according to our interest in them, and they rank the congregations as to their interest in each congregation, and they try to see where we get a matchup. And we were very fortunate that Reverend Dave chose us as a congregation at the top of his list, and so that's how that all works. It's not always so straightforward that you're going to get what you want, but in our case, we did. So now we had a lot of discussion about transition minister. How long do we need a minister? Why do we need 2 years? And we've been through it too many times. And so we all understand that, but we really do always have work to do between one minister and another to prepare for the next settled minister. And there are some things that we can do. Now, Reverend Dave has told us that he's been a transition minister. He's coming off a transition from Charleston, South Carolina. And an interim minister will be open for experiments and approaches to worship, perhaps variations in music, things like that, things that we might want to look at and say, are there some subtle shifts we might want to experience? And so that's something they're open to, because the transition minister will be there for 2 years and he leaves. He doesn't have to worry about long-term grudges or complaints. So, but for us, we have things like, the executive team. Reverend Neal kind of changed our organization of the executive team, and we need to look at how we want that to be settled before the next minister comes. Vision for how we develop as a hybrid church. That's still certainly open-ended and things we need to think about. And another one that a lot of people may not have been feeling, but we really need to rearrange our social justice organization and enhance the leadership and see if we can move that along at a different level than we've done in, say, the last year, certainly. And obviously COVID didn't help that. So we are in the process of starting a minister transition team. I will be chairing that, and perhaps some of you will get a call from me with a request to join. So if so, I hope you do. This will be to work with our new minister to discuss what questions are, some of the discussion, what questions are coming up, help him get introduced to the proper people in the church, you know, everybody eventually, but certainly in the beginning, committee chair people and things like that. So there will be focus groups, perhaps small groups, and other individual meetings with leaders. So I encourage you to, you know, give that team your thoughts of things you would like to see, and we can help sort those and pass those along. So, and again, I'll just second what the nominating committee said, and that is, you know, we're going to be forming a search team, and that's a very, very important team to participate on. So hopefully people will take up that call too. Thanks.
Thank you, Craig. And thank you very much, Craig, Dilip, and Yasara, for your service on the dedication. That is an extremely intense process, and we recognize and appreciate that in serving on the Interim Ministry Search Committee. Thank you. So we have allotted, we can actually take more than the allotted 5 minutes if we want to for questions and discussion about the interim minister and that process. So this is our time for those questions. And Rich, will you be okay in recognizing people?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Well, Sally, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Richard. I was wondering about the contract and if the interim minister will take a whole month of vacation. Will he be preaching in the summer, particularly August? I'd like to know that. Thank you.
He's made it clear to us that he does not plan to take huge blocks of vacation, perhaps up to a month in the summer, but he will be around in the summer. So it's not going to be the whole summer off. And, you know, we'll just have to see how that works out. But also the board has asked that they get a better notice of scheduling and things like that, so that they, you know, with Reverend Neil, a few things came as a bit of a surprise in that area. So we're going to try to not have those surprises anymore too.
Craig, do you mind if I add something?
Sure. So
I think that, you know, we follow the UUA standards in terms of what they recommend and what all UU churches, for the most part, are offering their full-time ministers in terms of vacation and study. And I think, you know, as a rule, we would do that. The UUA has those you know, recommendations in place for a reason. And it's because our ministers pretty much work 24 hours a day. You know, they don't have per se vacation days. But what they do get is they get, you know, a certain amount of time when they're not on. And most of the time they're working Saturday and Sunday. So I think, you know, unless there seems to be a reason, we would continue to follow that. But as Craig says, we have put into the contract, and we did have this in Reverend Neil's contract, but it wasn't as explicit, but just the recommendation that when an extended vacation is scheduled, that's done in consultation with the board. And that gives it a little bit of an opportunity for us to talk about how that might impact the congregation. And as Craig said, Reverend Dave, you know, he's only here for 2 years. It's not it's not his policy, you know, in his previous congregations to take like a 2 or 3 month all at once vacation. He does usually take a month, is what has told us, but that he spreads the rest of his vacation time over the course of the year. I do think that as a congregation, you know, Craig talked a little bit about some of the work we need to do before we bring in our next settled minister, before we call a new minister. And I think one of those things, and Sally, I mean, nobody's saying that this is how you're feeling. I do think that as a whole, there's a sense of, and again, I could be wrong, but I'm picking this up, which is that there's a sense of anxiety about not having a minister or the minister not being around. And I think that may be because, Reverend Neal sort of left us abruptly. That may be because of experiences with previous ministers. It could be, it could go all the way back to this congregation having a long-term minister who is very connected to the congregation, and that's still being an influence on us. I think part of the work we want to do with Reverend Dave is working through some of that, sort of figuring out how does some of those previous experiences with our ministers affect how we're feeling about the minister in general, and how can we work through some of that before we call our next minister and have that influence our decision on a new minister. So I'm hoping that we can work through some of that with Reverend Dave. And I've talked to him about that a little bit in the few conversations we've had. And I hope that, and he seems interested in working on that with us. And as Craig said, that's part of what an interim minister can do. It's not that they can do things without any accountability because they're only going to be here for 2 years, although that probably does play into it. But like Reverend, Evan, who was our last interim minister, they can challenge us a little bit and help us look at things that are a little bit more challenging because they have a short time frame. And also, honestly, because they're trained to help us look at those things and to challenge us a little bit. So I'm hoping that's what Reverend Dave is able to come in and do.
I forgot to mention that, Jess, that the interim ministers are actually, they go through classes and there's actually more than one in-depth class that they go through to really understand the concept of this transition ministry. And so and a lot of people specialize in that. They might do it for many, many years of their career. So to me, we were, just to say that was a key, that we were looking for somebody who had good experience as a transitional minister. Yeah, one of our goals. And I think we met that.
Well, it looks like Sally's got a follow-up.
Yes, my concern was a long time ago when I was on some committee, we talked about how people church shop in August. So I really wanted, when I was on the worship associate team, I wanted Neal to preach in August rather than take that whole month. I realize ministers work 24/7, and so does executive directors. But I wanted the sermons to go on in the summer. Thank you.
I'll just, one follow-up is just that in talking to Reverend Dave, one of his things is about bringing in the right voices for the community. And maybe part of that is, making sure we have the right policies and processes around summer worship, and making sure we're getting the right guest voices. And maybe, we've got a lot of technology now, Sally. I mean, let's talk to the worship committee. Maybe we pipe in Reverend Dave during August and he can pre-record some stuff for us. So we get us, I think that's something we can do now, right? We have that option. We'll just put Rich on it. Thank you, Sally.
Jansen.
Hi, I wanted to raise awareness about the changes in the Committee on Ministry Health. People may wonder why the nominating committee didn't have anybody to nominate for that committee. Jess, can you address that?
Sure. We decided this year that we were, and Nini, as was mentioned before, Nini's our liaison to the Committee on Ministry Health, and Trish Brandon, and all the members of that committee, some of whom I worked with when I was the liaison the year before. We've been working on sort of redefining what the Committee on Ministry Health is doing and what their objectives are. And as part of that redefining, we have decided that going forward, that committee will be appointed by the board, similar to the way we appoint the endowment committee, the legacy and endowment committee. And I think that, we can talk more about that. But over the course of the past 2 years, maybe even 3 years, while Reverend Neal was still here, we had decided that the Committee on Ministry Health would be best served to facilitate the assessment of our minister, but that the board should really handle that responsibility, and that the Committee on Ministry Health was actually better placed to help us understand the ministry as a whole and how it's serving the congregation as a whole. So as Eileen mentioned in her remarks earlier, the last 2 years, and even the year before that as well, but the last 2 years in particular, the Committee on Ministry Health has really been gathering feedback from the congregation that we've used in our planning process. So, a specific example was the year before, we had a really comprehensive survey that the Committee on Ministry Health did. And one of their recommendations was that we do more in terms of engagement by creating more affinity groups, meaning small groups, not necessarily small group ministry, but small groups that people can be involved in and can help them feel more connected to the community, but that aren't necessarily just Sunday service. And that made its way into our priorities for this year. So that's the kind of work we want the Committee on Ministry Health to do going forward. The focus groups that they did this year, fantastic, and we really appreciate that. And especially, as was mentioned, doing it all over Zoom, amazing. And we want them to continue doing that. And we don't necessarily need them to be appointed in order to do that work. What we really need is the skill set to gather input, to come up with the right way to gather that input. And so that's why we decided to have them be appointed instead of elected. Thank you, Jansen.
All right, Dylan.
So going back to Sally's question, I did send an email to Keith Cron, who's the UUA president for minister selection. And he said that he recommends that ministers not take the whole summer off. So he says 1 month is more appropriate. But contractually, if minister insists on taking the 2 months off, we probably cannot stop it. But we can have an understanding, and we have had that discussion with Reverend Dave. And so that's the understanding. And like Jessica said, if he wants to take August off, I hope that's not the case, then we'll work on taped sermon or something, or he comes in 2 days, depending on where he's going. So we'll have to work through it. And I think going forward, it'll be a part of the discussion during contract negotiation, and part of the understanding, not necessarily in the contract, but understanding that that's how we're going to deal.
I am not seeing more questions. If you have one, please unmute and speak.
I did see a question about the next service. So do we know yet? Are we going to wait until after the 6/13 service before we decide when the next in-person service will be, Rich?
Well, my assumption is it will be the following Sunday, but we won't put up a sign-up sheet until after the 13th.
Okay, excellent. And then the other question was, if people are participating in the service, should they register for the service, or will they already be included in the 100?
Well, I think you should let Rich and I take care of that. Like,
okay,
we will make sure that those people get on the list.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Well, if there are no further questions, it sounds like there aren't. Last chance for this round. Anybody? Okay, we'll proceed to the final, yay, order of business. And First, thanks again, Craig, Yusara, and Dilip for your hard work and the great result. We're so excited and thankful to you. So yeah, thank you. The final order of business will be Anders back reviewing the voting logistics, which are somewhat different this year. So take it away, Anders. And then after that, we've allowed 10 minutes if needed for any follow-up questions.
Great. Okay, thank you, Gail. For those of you who are familiar with the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the words "Don't panic" are put on the front cover in large friendly letters, as Doug Adams used to say. For those of you who've already voted, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And for those who haven't, don't panic. As Gail indicated, has mentioned a few times and indicated at the beginning, you have until 4 p.m. on Friday, which I believe is June 11th, this coming Friday, to vote. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. Now, if you received the letter, saw the letter that was sent out to the congregation a couple of weeks ago, that kind of laid out a lot of the basic information. What I'm going to do is just touch on two of the simplest ways that you can do that. And Rich, if you want to jump in at any point, that's fine. You can go to the MLUC website, and on the homepage, you will see in the lower right-hand corner, there's a section that says recent posts. And one of the first recent posts is the budget and the ballot. And if you click on that link, it will take you to a page basically, which says the budget and the ballot of the information on the budget, voting process, and voting for the nominated candidates is there. You can fill that out and simply send that, and that will be one way of doing it. The other way, which is relatively simple, is simply to send an email to vote@mluc.org. And in the body of this message, you will just simply say, I vote yes on the budget. I vote yes on the nominated candidates. And that will reach Rich and Mary Heil, and they will be able to tally that information. I would strongly urge, if you can use the email method, that probably is one of the simplest ways to do that. So as I said, those are the two methods that are the most straightforward ways of doing that. And those are the ones that I would recommend. Rich, did you have anything else that you wanted to add about the process?
No, although it is permissible to vote no, just so everybody knows.
Yes, thank you. Yes, for clarification. When you do the email version or the online version, you could certainly do that. The online version obviously gives you the option to look at and break things down a little bit more than the email, but in the email, you could also specify specifics if you're so inclined. If there are any questions, please speak now.
I'm not seeing questions.
Rich, I do see a question in the chat about, could you explain your CO2 experiment?
Oh, that's a typo. I don't know who put that in there.
Oh, okay.
It's not from me. Yeah, I can see you, Sally. I know you put it in there.
Well, we have a little extra time if you'd like to do it and people are interested. If there are no questions about the voting process.
Maybe I should let Yusara Antar describe it. She seems to love it. Really briefly, this is an airborne disease. So they have studied the transmission of airborne diseases in indoor spaces and the effect ventilation has on it. And they have essentially blocked transmission by sufficiently ventilating spaces. And they use CO2 as a proxy for measuring exhaled gases, which would include viruses or bacteria. What you do is, so people exhale a certain amount of carbon dioxide every minute. If you work out the math, 100 people in the main meeting room would exhale 10 pounds of carbon dioxide. So I put 10 pounds of dry ice in the main meeting room, spread it around, helped it to sublimate, to evaporate, and measured the CO2 levels in the main meeting room. And by opening all of the windows 6 inches and turning on the furthest away
smoke exhaust fan in the atrium. I could bring the CO2 levels in the main meeting room down to almost outdoor levels, certainly below 600, substantially below 600, which means that it's a very safe environment for putting people in. I did that even while the CO2 was continuing to evaporate. So I'm feeling very good about this method. I should say it will sabotage our air conditioning efforts. So dress flexibly if you're going to be sitting in the room. I have not tried it with people, obviously. The CO2 was a simulation of 100 people in the room. If it turns out 100 people in the room allows us to get these levels that low, we will increase the number. We'll also monitor it during and after the one hymn. And again, if it continues to be this low, we will just ease up on the restrictions while continuing to watch it. Terry.
I'm just curious, Rich. First of all, I'm with you, Sarah. I think this is amazing. And I'm loving the dry ice and everything else. It's wonderful. So thank you again for all of that. Have you had any sense of what the impact will be on the service of having that far exhaust fan on? How much noise does it create, and to what extent might that disrupt the service to some extent?
So I picked the fan that's furthest away from the main meeting room, and I only opened one pair of doors in the back room, and it didn't seem loud to me. It didn't seem louder than running the air conditioner in the main meeting room, which we do. We may have to find ourselves tweaking the microphone settings to tune out certain background noises for recording purposes, but I think it'll be fine. And again, it's an experiment. Having 100 people in the room will be different. Different as far as breathing goes, it'll be different as far as acoustics goes. There's no substitute for trying it out.
Thanks.
Betsy, is that a question? Yep.
Thank you, Rich. I assume that the seats in the main meeting room next Sunday will be spaced apart.
We will spread them around.
Okay.
Some people, households like to sit together. So I think people will do some moving of their own as well.
Thank you.
Are we actually removing the extra chairs? Because that's a lot of work.
If they're not,
we haven't talked about that, but
they'll be stacked up on the side to some extent. But we just may shove them around a bit. Cynthia.
Yes, you did an excellent job on presenting the budget and explaining the expenses. It would also be helpful to include the balance sheet in a financial presentation so that we could see the endowment and the cash, and what the assets and liabilities of the church are. So I just wanted to suggest to include a balance sheet.
So my presentation is generally to describe the budget and encourage you to vote for it. If we want to have a full financial report in the annual meeting, the board should consider whether to allocate that time. And I'd be happy to do it. I'm sure Joe would be happy to participate, and we could do it. But it would be more time, and it's a question of whether the congregational meeting's the best time for that, or another meeting would be better. Generally, I do a full report to the board in August, and I'll certainly be doing one for the interim minister. So we might find a way to share it then.
Right. Rich, we also, the past 2 years, we've done the extra meeting, which is budget focused, and it's an individual, people can ask individual questions. That might be the right time to do that if we continue to do that extra budget meeting.
It'd be fine with me too.
Do we have any other questions?
I've had my hand up. I'm not sure why.
Oh, hey, Craig, sorry.
Seen, but I do have a question, and that is, Well, I'm really excited about going to an in-person meeting. And, you know, last Friday, we had about 20 men at breakfast together. I went to a church auction dinner that night, and it feels like old times. But my concern is, in our quest to get everything in person, I hope we don't reduce Reverend Christine's sermons, because she's got a couple of more months to work with us, and hope we utilize her and you know, still be live. So, you know, that kind of hybrid.
So this coming Sunday, of course, we have a live minister. We have Livy Smith preaching. In coming services, we still have Christine scheduled, and her sermon part will be projected on the screen and put into the sound system. This is, as Don Starr mentioned, this was really sudden. So there are a lot of things we can't change and don't want to change. And we'll be muddling through the next month of services to figure this out.
Thank you.
We can guarantee we'll have in-person and we'll have good streaming as well.
You see any other questions, Rich?
I don't. If I'm missing you, you can unmute and speak. Oh, Mary.
Can we do this nifty airflow experiment in the fireside room and the atrium to see when we can have inside coffee hours?
Yes, we will be doing more experiments. I'm going to be testing the restrooms pretty early on, just to see what needs to happen in there, but also the large meeting rooms. We'll do the same kind of experiments. And I've been asked to buy dry ice to welcome the new minister so he can emerge from the fog at the appropriate moment. Done?
How about some fire stuff? Fire hoses, so he comes in fire and fog and everything else.
Fire and brimstone is what we need.
Yeah.
I assume, Rich, that for the time being, masks will be required.
Masks will be required indoors. Outdoors, it's according to your preference.
And to Mary's point, I think that's part of why we want to be able to hold the coffee hours outdoors, is so we do have some opportunity to interact with each other unmasked, if you're vaccinated or if that's your preference. And we'll still have spaces where people can, if they are wearing masks, they can, you know, sort of step to the side and drink their coffee at a distance and then come back into the socialization. If we move indoors, it'd be a lot harder to drink coffee, at least at this point in the where we are. But as Don Starr said, we're going to reconsider as transmission levels continue to go down in our community, and as Rich continues to do tests, and as our children, you know, are able to get vaccinated, because obviously that's going to bring us to a whole new level of immunity in the community. So good question, Mary. Thank you.
You see any other questions?
I'm not seeing other questions. So again, if I'm missing you, just please unmute and speak.
Terry, if I could just, in good UU tradition, it's probably more of a statement than a question. But I think those of us who have been on the Co2 have felt it's very important that we are as inclusive as possible, both during this transition time, but then also long term, which I know is something that's very much part of the consideration of how do we include people who are not comfortable for whatever reason, or don't feel able to come, or need to be included one way or the other. And they say that's not just an interim thing. I think that's hopefully something we learn from the pandemic and grow from.
Well, that is a lovely sentiment, and I think that is definitely a goal. If we see no other questions, Rich, it look like
I'm not seeing any more.
okay. So it appears there's no further business. We'll give you one more shot if anyone wants to unmute and speak up or raise their hand. Okay. Thanks to all of our presenters and to all of you for your virtual participation and attendance. And remember to vote and be safe and be well. And there being no further business, this meeting is now adjourned. Go in peace until we meet again in person.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.